Hi everyone, Tea Drinker here, and today I'm reacting to Shogun Episode 2. I am so excited to see what's going to happen next. I loved Episode 1, I thought it was just such a fantastic pilot, so let's see what's going to happen. Oh, we're going back. Okay. I take it this is the Taiko who passed away? Yeah, Taiko's dying because that was a son from the last episode. He's adorable. Oh! She's sharing a look. I'd love to know what she said in the actual Japanese there. What is he going to say to Toranaga? Very eloquent. Oh, are we going to see Toranaga turn it down? And then that's what led... Okay, very interesting. Yes, yeah, exactly. Toranaga is just on it. I'm really liking this show so far. Interesting. You must defeat the Taiko's 7 deadly exes. Oh, very good quote. Very good quote. Oh my god, that view. Oh! Oh great, our title. What's our title gonna be? Oh, these landscapes. Oh. This is a fantastic opening theme. Like, it's just so orchestral, the type of thing you usually just get in the background of scenes, never usually as like the main theme for a show. Rachel Kondo and Justin Marks, you're doing a great job so far. Servants of Two Masters. Alright, Blackthorn.
English pilot. Diseased, and he's got a filthy mouth. He's like a back passage whore of the 15th rank. Know what I mean, brother, is it?
So we show these to the Japanese, and he will be hanged for piracy.
This pirate, he's not a man to leave his fate with God. I suggest you don't either.
Those could be very wise words.
Martin.
Oh, this is a translator. He was referenced in the last episode.
He will see to it this man is not a problem.
So this is interesting, we might get a bit of an opponent character here. Yaichio, you're being nosy.
Good, so you'll be able to twist my words in your Portuguese favor.
Blackthorn doesn't care. I like him. I like him as a character.
But I am not your assassin. That you will do yourself.
Well able for him. Great shot.
Yes. Though I won't know for sure till I'm dead. Then I would commend my soul to God, or surely I would die by the hand of a techie like you.
That was a fantastic interaction.
Toranaga's chief rival. If you value your life, do not say a word.
Naruhodo.
その異端者それがしには何の値打ちもござらん。お望みとあらば息子に命じて牢にでも放り込んでおきまするが。
ごぼうの方が近いかもしれませんが。
息子と一緒になって笑うと、お前はこやつ屋上中か何かと思うてるのか。殿はどのような御用でお前が呼ばれたのじゃ。
Great focus.
お前ならわかるか。何故お前の母はおとなしく家に収まっておれんのじゃ。
キリ様こそ聡明で情に深く天真爛漫で
年老いておりますればあの世へ旅立つまでもっと大事にしていただかねと
You need respect now. You're lovely.
私も今もたやけまする
お前の大きな尻と同じじゃ。
あのや
I like world building scenes like these. They're really great.
パードレ様は正直なお方にございまする。先ほどの通訳には何一つ
あの偉人の方は
あの者には用心せねばという気がいたしまする。
さりながらこの一件、殿の断罪と何の関わりがあると仰せでございましょうや。何故そこにキリシタンの大老が出てまいるのでござるか。
殿に断罪が下されるのは 残りの大老が結束して票を投じた場合のみにござりまする。殿はあの偉人を用いて石堂とキリシタンの大老との結束に。
The Senor is real.
Of Lord Toranaga, I'm not meant to be here.
Toranaga brought you to Osaka.
And I must be allowed to leave.
Dear God.
This is such an interesting conflict.
You don't know their games. If Toranaga claimed you as an ally, you'll never leave Japan alive.
Not good for Blackthorn. Isn't the scenery just so nice? The music works really, really great for montage sequences like these.
その前に一つ片付けておきたいことがござる。異端者のことよ。虎長が大坂に招き入れた。牢に入れただけでは足りぬのじゃ。
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's
異端者がマニラにおいてキリシタンの信徒をなぶり殺しにしたという感化的な話でござるよ。
虎長が我らをどう見てるのか分かったような気がいたした。官僚でござる。はてさてオミラはパードレどもが積み上げる山ほどの献上品がなかったとしてもデウスとやらに忠誠を尽くされるのでござろうか。
That old man speaking to Blackthorn was right.
賛否をどうぞ。
デウスの皆において要請する。異端者の処刑が先じゃ。Die a martyr. On the cross, perhaps. These Jesuits care nothing for the souls. They made an idol of that cursed black ship. That's how they dominate trade. You can't play their game. Their rules are too opaque.
You don't know me.
I've known 1,000 of you.
Oh. The dialogue is very good in this show, I must say. That was great, how they kept it hidden.
The church is doing all it can to keep your business running on time.
You mean our business?
It's great that we've seen so much set up against Blackthorn already.
The dark thoughts you have confessed to me in the past, are they still with you?
This is great, getting backstory for her.
I've read his journals. Whatever your heart tells you about him, he's guilty of worse.
Yeah, a lot set up against Blackthorn. Yay! Haven't seen you. I mean, you're a terrible person, but whatever. You're interesting, that's all that matters for this show. Good question. Yeah, Ishido's no dummy. He's gonna look right past that. Oh.
残念だが、あの偉人の処刑はすでに再開しておる。キリシタン大老お二方に押し切られたのよ。
Oh, Yabushige, what are you planning? What are you planning? Yeah. What is it? What's it gonna be? Great shot. Oh my god, that was a fantastic shot they just did. I'm curious to see where it was this was filmed, if it's actually close to Osaka itself where a lot of this was filmed. And that's that. Wow. He is ruthless. Talk about a reinforcement of character. He sure is. Inu janai desu ne.
その図らずもの運に恵まれておるようじゃの。
Yeah, he's a very lucky man. That look.
しかしその前に通詞を呼びまするぞ。
Okay, Mariko's stepping up to the plate. Alright, let's do it. Let's go. I'd have no way of doing this. I am so bad with directions.
To use it because your country falls into the Portuguese half.
Yeah.
ポルトガルとスペインの2つの国が東洋の島々を分け合ったと信じているようでございます。
This is so interesting. Especially the fact that it actually happened.
誠にポルトガル。
Oh, this is so interesting.
ならば我ら民国との間で天下を二分してやろう。
黙っておれ。
ポルトガルの望みはキリシタンにあらざる天下人を追放し、仲間であるキリシタンの統治者を据える
Yeah.
と申しておりまする。
お前は何を求めて火の元に来たのじゃ。
To vanquish our common enemy.
Yes.
戦うのに殿の力添えに届くため。
Oh, this is all shaping up so well.
You are outnumbered. It is hopeless.
He doesn't care.
Unless I win.
己が勝てば望みはある。
Oh, this is gonna be such a fantastic story. Oh, this is gonna be so good.
I've already bathed.
In the prison.
In the village.
That was some time ago.
2 baths in a week. What do you want me to catch the flux?
わしは常に利益について考えておる。そっちの国と我が国の力にわしは知らぬことがあまりに多い。あの偉人はよう知っておるようじゃがの。
Yeah, he's wising up.
しばらく見合わせることに。
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, he's just coming right out and saying it. Okay. I thought he was going to hold back just a little bit.
This god cursed heretic doesn't even have the decency to ruin us slowly.
I mean, it makes total sense that he would be in with them. Like, why would the priest not follow the money? How's our stinky boy? I did not see that coming. I did not see that coming. Is Blackthorn gonna save the day and earn brownie points? That was such a good shot. Oh, that was great. Oh, that was one long take. Love the way Toranaga just watched that interaction happen. Yeah. Oh, please don't tell me this is the end of the episode. I just checked the time code, it's the end of the episode. Yeah, okay. Ugh. Oh, I'm gonna have to wait a couple days before watching the next one. Ugh. That was fantastic. I had a really great time with that. So the first episode of Shogun did a lot with regards to establishing the characters, and it definitely took the rewatch for episode 1 for me to get everything. Episode 2 just absolutely... Now that the story is like kind of fully in gear, it's really starting to take form, like seeing the alliance between Blackthorn and Toranaga. You could infer it from the ending of episode 1, but this episode really confirms it now. So yeah, I loved that. That was that was such a great time doing that, and that is my reaction. And now here is the review. So I think the opening scene from this episode really just did such a fantastic job of giving us exposition as to how exactly all this came to be, with Toranaga being part of the regents who are looking after the throne until Yaichio is of age to do so. We see the interaction Toranaga had with the Tokai and the camaraderie that both of them had, but most importantly, we got exposition for the shared value system and the shared mentality that both of these men have. There's a lot that was covered there, but even just to pick up on that very last line, how the Taiko would want, he would want Toranaga to teach his son that he who stands at the top is going to be the loneliest person in the realm, rather than being the most powerful or being the most revered. He's specifically talking about he is going to be the loneliest. He talks about how he wishes for Toranaga to teach him to be wary of both friend and foe alike. But most importantly, between the two men from their conversation, we understand that both of them seek the exact same goal, in that both men want it to be the case where civil war does not break out in Japan. That this is not a case of infighting, as he puts it himself to Toranaga. He describes it as... Well, it is Toranaga who describes the situation as effectively creating a political stalemate, and that's exactly what it is. If it is a stalemate that results in his son getting the throne and all this useless violence being avoided, then that would be the best case scenario, of course. So within a scene like this, it's great reinforcement for exactly what it is that Toranaga wishes to achieve, or at least a year ago wished to achieve. Again, we get that sense of a ethical value system from Toranaga. So we see now that the external conflict that's going to be happening from this point onwards, it's not just about resolving his internal conflict. It's a case of solving his philosophical conflict, which is the cessation of violence itself. So it was just very, very well done. They were even able to sprinkle in a little bit of humor in there as well with Mariko's character, and even to have the son Yaichio, to have him ask very earnestly, of his father, when I see you in heaven, will you still have your fingernails and eyelashes? Just such an innocent question, and you see how moved he is by his son's question, and even then saying to myself, is all of this just a dream of a dream? Overall, I just thought it was a very simple scene. There isn't necessarily like a huge amount to talk about, but when you get scenes like that they do such a great job of setting up the exposition for the episode, as well as characterizing the protagonist, or any characters indeed. Just as far as opening scenes go, they just did a terrific job. So before we get the interaction between Blackthorn with Toranaga and Mariko, we get I suppose you could maybe call it a bit of a flashback scene, just in the sense that it happened earlier in that day, in which Tsuji is speaking to his higher up, along with Rodriguez, who, it's great seeing him, just because I know the actor from Lost. It's always great to see that actor. We have a conversation with Tsuji in which we come to understand that the presence of Blackthorn is not exactly a welcome one. Given the fact that he knows a great deal about the Portuguese, he seems to know a little bit too much. In particular, all the things that are within his journal could be very, very detrimental were Toranaga to get his hands on it, given the fact that there are going to be a certain number of the regions who are looking to line their pockets by not so much line their pockets, but kind of climb the ladder, and they're willing to line the pockets of the priests in order to achieve what they need. And if the Portuguese are going to be in any way threatened by the arrival of Blackthorn, who is not associated with them, he not only is he not Portuguese himself, he's not even Catholic. He has nothing to gain from being in alliance with the priests. If anything, he has quite a bit to gain from working against the Portuguese. So as such, we understand that Tsuji is going to be a bit of an opponent for Blackthorn. Even though he seems like an ally, he's a bit of a fake ally in that regard, which again is great setup for one of the big external conflicts for this episode. And how far it's going to go into the actual series itself, we don't know at this point, but be that as it may, it's a great payoff to what we got established towards just the very tail end of episode 1, in which Rodriguez says to Blackthorn right away, I am going to be giving this journal to the, I believe it's a rudder, is what they referred to it as. I'm going to be giving this rudder to the Portuguese, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. So getting that payoff right away is really, really great. But nonetheless, I think that was a great setup of conflict for the duration of the episode, and it's a great way of then leading us into the actual scene between Blackthorn speaking to Toranaga. So we have the arrival of Ishido into the scene, but right before that happens, I want to talk about just a first interaction between Blackthorn and Toranaga, which absolutely did not disappoint. You gotta love how straightforward both of these men are. It makes the dialogue between them work quite seamlessly, and I loved from a production point of view, like a directorial production point of view. I didn't get to say it during the reaction itself as it was going a little bit quickly, but I love how they slowly fade out Tsuji's voice as a translator between the two of them, just gradually over about a 15 to 20 second period. So that allows us as the audience to get what Toranaga is saying and then what Blackthorn is saying back and forth, as if both men were literally speaking the exact same language. We understand that Toranaga is very much trying to suss out what Blackthorn is about. He is trying to, for him to learn so much about what Portugal is and what England is, and learn all these fine details, both within this scene and the big scene that comes later on during the episode. Its importance really can't be overstated. But from a character point of view, again, I just love how straightforward both of these men are. I love how both of them have every right to be paranoid in their position. And I was a bit surprised by Blackthorn in that when Toranaga asks him directly, what if we are to attack you? What if we are to just take what we want from you and be on our merry way, essentially, is what he's asking. To which Blackthorn says, well, then I would go with God, essentially, is what he's saying there, which is a great parallel between himself And Mariko, who we saw in the previous episode, she is devotedly Catholic as opposed to Blackthorn, who is devotedly Protestant. But having both these characters who are just so devoted in that way, who are now, we don't know this yet from this scene, but we can still kind of infer from seeing these type of narratives and knowing where they are going to go. The fact that we can infer that both of them will be working side by side, and that their lowest common denominator characteristic in a particular way is their devotion to God, which of course Toranaga is going to see, and that's what he values from both of these people. It's a really, really strong parallel. In general, from Blackthorn's point of view, you can understand him being very, very afraid in this situation, but again, I think that's what made the first episode work so effectively, is the fact that for everything we've seen, we know that he isn't that afraid. He does have his fears, but he is also a very, very brave individual. Whether he's brave or just stubborn, I guess in a lot of ways, both of them surmount to the same thing, don't they? But nonetheless, for our initial interaction between Toranaga and Blackthorn, I was very much impressed. And then in the second half of the scene, we have the arrival of Ishido. I think, again, it's very, very interesting to see the type of character who Toranaga is, and that he's playing it cool and acting as if he doesn't need Blackthorn at all. But of course we got the exposition from the previous episode, and that he is very, very interested in Blackthorn, that having him around will be absolutely nothing but an asset given the knowledge he has. But of course he has to kind of play the long game here, and for Ishido to specifically mention how imminent the impeachment is, as he says himself, I think that's great. From an audience perspective, we got a great ticking clock there. We get a great reminder as to the stakes that Toranaga is facing as the result of the external conflict he's going through. And again, just hearing the dialogue from Blackthorn in the first episode, I found how vulgar he is to be a little bit grating, but they're very much trying to explicate the fact that he is a vulgar character, and I'm assuming with whatever kind of arc he is going to have throughout the remainder of the series, that is going to change, that the vulgarity is there as a means of creating this before and after for us as an audience member. Now, my only complaint about the show thus far is just that sometimes it's a little bit too much, the way he outbursts. I think they definitely could have kept it in, because he does come across just a little bit one note sometimes because of that, or maybe it's just a little bit repetitive and it's just a little bit too cartoony for us as the audience to really click with. That's the only complaint, but it's very, very small. It does not stop me liking the character or the performance, and it certainly does not act as in any way, shape or form an impediment for my enjoyment of the show. But just, if I were to mention one thing thus far that I'm not 100% there with, that's the only thing. We got quite a lot in the next scene. That was very much an exposition dump for the show. For Mariko, we are introduced formally to her son and her husband. That scene worked really, really great in that it's 17th century Japan, like it's just turned the year 1600. The division of roles between men and women, it does need to be addressed in some point. I mean, it's just going to come out naturally with this type of show, a show that is so devoted to historical accuracy, as well as a certain degree of realism, I suppose you could say. Realism relative to our own world and how the characters act and behave and speak. It's not 100% realistic, but it's definitely not like a cartoony portrayal of 17th century Japan by any stretch. Having Mariko's husband, who we see is very, very dismissive and very, very thinking of himself, asking of their own son very straightforwardly, why would your mother have anything to do outside of this house? We can tell that there's definitely an abusive undercurrent there. Maybe it isn't abusive, but there's definitely that sort of very patriarchal viewpoint that he has towards Mariko. And of course then we get the lingering shot on Mariko's face as she's enduring all this, not putting up a fight as audience members, given what we've known of Mariko thus far. And of course, just with this kind of scene, that kind of shot, we know that she is an absolute warrior, that nothing is getting past her, that she knows, similar to Toranaga, how to play the long game with these kind of things to avoid battles in order to win an eventual war. So we know that she is going to come into some shape or form of power by the end of this series, just because, again, we're getting a scene like that very, very early on, and with the scene itself being very focused on her, if not her being the primary focus of the scene, you could say. That we know that that type of interaction between her and her husband is used as a means to an end of characterizing her. Be that as it may, we then get Hiromatsu coming into the room, so we see him now with daughter-in-law in the same room interacting with one another, and she is now being brought to Toranaga. So to have that bit of information act as a bit of a foil for her husband's arrogance and her husband's dismissal of the idea of Mariko having anything to do that doesn't necessitate being with inside the home itself. That was just a great little moment when you see him grimace, when you see him being a bit embarrassed when he realized it isn't him being summoned but his wife instead. It was a great moment. So our next scene with Toranaga speaking at the meeting that he's held is just absolutely fantastic. I do have a tiny bit of a gripe, and it's so small it's barely worth mentioning, but I mean, look, I think that this show is going to be just absolutely fantastic. I think it's probably going to be, without a doubt, one of the strongest miniseries I've watched in a while, just even from these first 2 episodes I've seen by now, knowing that it's all going to be an enclosed narrative. It's only going to be the 10 episodes long, and nonetheless, seeing how well produced it is and how well written it is and how historically accurate it seems to be, the amount of effort that's put into something like this, I'm going to be singing its praises for this and the succeeding 8 episodes. So you know what, if I have tiny things to criticize, I'm going to do that, because I already know it's going to be an amazing show. My small criticism, and I know why they do it as a storytelling convention, I know, but it's like Hiromatsu questioning, but my lord, why would you be doing something like this? As if he wouldn't have figured it out. We get the exposition in the previous episode that the 2 of them have been friends for a very long time. Hiromatsu has a good head on his shoulders. It's from a screenwriting point of view, I know that they have a character like him say a sentence like that because it gives exposition to us. It just makes it clear, rather than have... But I still think we could have had Hiromatsu just kind of say, you're planning to do this, aren't you? As opposed to, but why are you planning to act in this way? What's going on? Like, the character is not that naive. I think they did lampshade it a little bit with Toranaga saying you could use some of your daughter-in-law's intuition. So that was its saving grace, and the fact that it wasn't just there as a streamlined way of creating exposition for the audience. They did it in a way that it ends up characterizing Mariko as well. So in that regard, I can give it a little bit more of a pass, but look, that's a tiny gripe. Be that as it may, it was still an incredibly, and just a great scene. You know, we got the bit of world building where you have the other lady there who's pregnant and she's taken away. You have Toranaga's wife there as well, and just like a little bit of banter between the 2 of them. And again, we just get the very explicit, very upfront and quickly paced setup that Toranaga is going to use Blackthorn as a means to an end of division between Ishido and the other regions as well. So to get so much plot happening, like in comparison to the previous episode, I find this to be very, very quickly paced. It's quite a minimal story from what I can gather. Not that it isn't going to get more complicated. There are 8 more episodes, but we're not getting huge sword fights every single episode. We're not getting any major characters like killed this early on or anything like that. They are very much working at a deliberate pace, but nonetheless, the amount of plot that has happened, the amount of characterization we have gotten so far, I mean, at this point, I'm only halfway through the 2nd episode with regards to reviewing it, and we've gotten so much already. I just find it to be really, really impressive. The scene with Blackthorn in the prison talking to the Jesuit priest, he seems to be kind of the main priest they're all looking for guidance for in the prison. There isn't necessarily a huge amount to talk about there. What we're getting there is the exposition very directly to Blackthorn about who Toranaga is, what the situation is with the other regions, how all of them are essentially out to get Toranaga given the threat that he represents and the power that he could possibly take away from them. And of course, it goes without saying that all of them want to maintain as much power as they possibly can, but also try to climb the ladder to the best way that they can as well. Nonetheless, that scene of exposition isn't telling us anything new as audience members, but we're seeing Blackthorn's reaction to all of this, with him being a fish out of water, the proverbial stranger in a strange land. It's very interesting when you consider how we got that fantastic line where the priest says, "Death is the only punishment here." Like, just what a brutal, unflinching way of putting it, and there's a real sense of terror behind Blackthorn's eyes when he's learning all of this. In general, I thought it was a great setup for what's going to be the rest of the conflict for Blackthorn's character, and that's pretty much all I have to say about that scene. So, the division that Toranaga seems to create between Ishido and the other regions, it doesn't seem to be that far off. I like that scene in which Ishido is talking to the others and he demands that they sign the impeachment right here, right now. Towards they're told, no, we need to thwart the threat of the heretic to us before we can do anything else. And then, of course, later on in the episode, we get the very explicit exposition that Kuriyama is directly led by Wealth. That him defeating the heretic, of course, as we can infer already, let alone from the scene to come later, is that Kuriyama has no interest in doing this for religious reasons. This is all a means to an end of him lining his own pocket. And why wouldn't he? Who's really going to stop in this place and at this point in time? He wouldn't have been talked about it on Twitter or anything like that. He wouldn't have been cancelled for this type of behavior. This is literally just the way it was back then, and of course in many places in the world it still is now. Probably everywhere, just in more covert ways. That is a total tangent, not related to the scene. We get Ishido's obvious dismay at that type of news, but nonetheless, it's great in that, for whatever reasons Kuriyama and indeed the others may be acting, nonetheless, for them to simply bring up the matter of religion in and of itself, and then for Ishido to very explicitly make it clear that he is valuing the throne, he's valuing creating their new law and order, independent of what way it's going to affect religion. For him to make his priorities known is, even if it's not necessarily creating that visible of a divide between himself and the men, for that division to be made clear as audience members, it's a great setup. It's a great setup for the oncoming conflict that is going to be there for the next 8 episodes. If you're just watching the scene in of itself and you've never seen any other episode of Shogun, any other scene from Shogun before, you'd be forgiven for thinking, well, this is just a quarrel between one region and the others. But given the fact that we've had the exposition already of how the other 3 are in the palm of Ishido's hand, and of course, again, seeing what happened in that previous scene with Toranaga talking about how he wants to sow division between them, I think it's just a great setup. It's a great building of tension. And again, it's going to be just great setup for the external conflict that is now going to come to pass. So we get further exposition for Blackthorn quite quickly, in that the priest makes it known to him not only about what could be going on in Toranaga's head, given that he is a Minawara, meaning that he could become the Shogun, but we find out pretty directly that given the Chinese animosity for Japan, that is why they go through the Portuguese, that it is very easy for the Portuguese to line their pockets, and as such, with Blackthorn having a vendetta against the Portuguese, but being able to speak Portuguese and of course being able to assimilate if needs be, he is truly going to be an invaluable asset for Toranaga, so long as Toranaga is able to keep his head on his shoulders, both figuratively and literally. And even having all of this conversation happen in an environment in which, as they say, one man is being taken away every single hour to get his head chopped off, truly, what could Blackthorn have to lose? It's not a case of his days being numbered, his hours are numbered, so he might as well do this. He might as well try to navigate this game, which, as the priest says, is too opaque for Blackthorn to play. And of course, with the priest, we get the exposition that he's been here for 28 years now, so he's going to be very, very reluctant to try to do anything to rock the boat in any shape or form whatsoever. But nonetheless, this is Blackthorn we're dealing with, so rock the boat he will. Oh, and actually, it just came to mind as well, just as I was finishing up that last point, the fact that the ship for all the trade is referred to as the black chip as well. From a thematic point of view, that's that's just brilliant. And on that point regarding team and the build up to Suji having his conversation with Mariko, we see him talking to a tradesman, in which a tradesman is really, really anxious to get the business back on the road, and to which Suji responds as, look, as soon as the church has an answer for me, that's when I'll have an answer for you. So seeing that link between the capitalist endeavor as well as religious endeavor and how the two of them ultimately form the one system is very, very strong. I mean, like so many of the shows that I've kind of been watching recently, you know, with the likes of Black Sails, with the likes of The Wire, they are dealing with capitalism as a structural enterprise and seeing it from the top down, how it trickles down and affects everybody. But to have the religious element brought into that, especially within the 17th century where religion was religion, like its importance is basically it's equitable to possibly geography or economic itself, the power of religious influence. So to see a show deal with that particular type of subject matter is something that I haven't really seen before, not in this type of series to this type of extent. Religion can be dealt with on an individual level, but to see a show deal with the systemic problems of religion, even if it was from an archaic model of the past, it's still not that archaic given how prevalent it is in so much of the world, including the Western world. So having the show tell this kind of story and deal with these particular themes is very, very compelling for me. When we do get the scene between Suji and Mariko, it's great in that we get exposition of how Suji is very aware of the type of man that Blackthorn is. Well, we knew that from the beginning of the episode, but it's more so that he's relaying that to Mariko, whom he references has very, very strong intuition, and he is no stranger to honesty with her. He says, whatever your intuition is with him, I guarantee you, he's done even worse. And for him to just have that one line where he talks about how, Mariko, you have confessed dark things to me in the past. We're getting a lot of characterization for Mariko in this episode, which I find very, very strong. And again, when you get exposition, it comes naturally, organically through two characters speaking with one another anyway. It's really, really good. Oh, I tell you, just rewatching that scene between Ishido and Yabushige, absolutely brilliant. And there's going to be, of course, the whole ambush in the forest scene coming up, but right before that, what an amazing scene. You see that these two men whom you wouldn't necessarily link together, they were clearly friends in the past. They have this camaraderie similar to the Tokai and Toranaga at the very beginning of the episode with that flashback scene. But here we have Ishido and Yabushige they talk as if they're catching up as old friends. Of course, Yabushige does have to be very polite when he makes not necessarily an offhand remark, but a bit of an ineloquent remark about how the trust of the union could break. He has to bow out of apology for that. But nonetheless, for Ishido to be giving us the backstory of how the Tokai built the palace with his finest stone, how there's clearly a political divide between these two men speaking with one another right now, given that Yabushige has sworn loyalty to Toranaga, and how Ishido even says to him straight up, he says that, if Toranaga is to be killed, you're going to be killed right along with him. To which Yabushige very stoically, very, very stoically says that may be the case, but I'm not just thinking of myself here. I'm thinking about in the future what is to happen if you were to take control, what is going to happen with regards to the internal conflict of the country itself. And that leads us to Ishido revealing that, well, look, I've already said that I'd agree to Blackthorn being killed, so this is out of my hands. To which Yabushige very coyly says, well, what if there's something I can do about that? Paraphrasing, but that is basically what he said. I think for me, a scene like that, so far I was thinking this just in the middle of the rewatch. I was thinking, the show has done such a great job in, it's that expression, I forget the exact way it's phrased, but it's something to do like when you talk about the micro, you end up representing the macro. When you talk about the specific you end up creating something universal. For this show to really give us all this detail about, the exact way politics is handled in this particular area, and for so much of the dialogue to come up naturally through these characters interacting in the exact same way that we're used to seeing, not just in Western media, but just in general in the West with our own understanding of how politics operate. It does a really great job of removing that idea of other from watching stories of different cultures and different civilizations and different races and, most importantly, different time periods. I think that watching that scene of, political combatants who are also on friendly terms with one another, something that you've seen so many times in Western productions, particularly in the last 20 to 30 years, and seeing it in a context of Japanese historical fiction. Yep, this show is very much made for me. Yabushige is such a weirdo. I mean, that scene where he gets the bandits to kill Lord Kamiya's men, and then, of course, kills those bandits in order to make sure no one lives to tell the tale about it, as a means to an end of gaining ownership of Blackthorn. And I'm using the word ownership in that seeing him tied up, he just makes him act like a dog, making him even say, "Oriwa Inuja." Dude, I know you're the type of dude to boil people alive. We got that in episode 1, so look, I'm not going to attribute that much of a ethical grounds to you, but that's a little bit much. I think you don't even know Blackthorn yet. He could be a really, really nice guy and you're making him act like this. He could be another Ishido. You never know. You haven't spoken to him. All joking aside, however, I thought the scene was just really, really well done. How much of that also was done in a long take, and then there were other shots that were considerably longer than you would think. Just a build up to it all as well. It was a great deal of tension delivered. I'm loving the practical effects that are used in this as well, like the blood coming out of the man's throat. I don't believe that was CGI from the looks of it. It seemed to be a practical effect, and be it one or the other, in any case, I found it really impressive. And again, showing the tenacity that Yabushige has, for as pointlessly ruthless as he is, as we've seen in that scene towards Blackthorn, and just acting with a very teenage, juvenile mentality. Nonetheless, seeing how, not bloodthirsty isn't the right word, but just how committed he is to using violence as a means to an end of achieving what he wants. And of course, we know it's not his bloodlust, but his death fascination, as we got in the previous episode. There's a lot there. Yabushige is giving us quite a lot. So then we had the big climax of the episode, and I say that given that in a succeeding scene there's going to be an assassin going around killing a bunch of people, but well and truly it is the climax plot-wise for this episode, and kind of a bit of a conclusion for the episode arc for Blackthorn in a way, in the way that if you want to consider it a half arc for him, we basically get him coming fully into his own, in that where he was very much afraid at the prospect of death. Here we have putting all of his eggs in one basket, so to speak, and saying, not only am I going to give up all this information to Toranaga, but I am willing to bet my life on fighting the Portuguese. We get Toranaga gets the exposition of, he gets all this information relayed to him about the Portuguese bases and how this base was actually used for gun running by Japanese dissenters. We have him further questioning Blackthorn, and indeed Mariko actually does it herself to understand that this is not the type of thing you should be doing unless you were willing to swear by your god, lest the consequences we were to impose on you, because what we could do to, even though they don't say it, you very much get the impression that what we could do to you if you turn out to be lying about this, it's going to be far worse than death. We'll make sure that whatever way you're punished for this will be one that any possible other person who hears stories of this will be terrified, and why wouldn't they be? But nonetheless, he is telling the truth, and that bit where Toranaga tells him you're outnumbered as it's hopeless, Blackthorn responds, unless I win. When Toranaga is told that, the actor just has this tiny smile, just really, really subtle for like a split second when he hears that. He's doing an incredible job, as all of them are. And I mean, like, as you probably saw from my reaction itself, like, this is it. This is the huge climax of the first part. I mean, you could even consider this to be like the true inciting incident for the entire rest of the series, and that here you have our two protagonists and Mariko as well, our three protagonists. You have them ready to wage war. You have the three of them willing to put all their forces behind them, each one of them fighting their own battles. Toranaga for maintaining the safety of the throne, Blackthorn raging against the Portuguese, and Mariko obviously dealing with her own demons in some shape or form. And seeing how all of this is coalescing into fighting a similar battle. And again, with the fact that all this as well is happening with the impeachment looming with Ishido and the regents. It's definitely my type of show, again, for how historically accurate it is, and the fact that it was based on a true story, and how high the level of production is, like with the music and the cinematography, but also just have a very solid story. It's quite a simple story. It's not doing anything by any stretch trying to reinvent the wheel of story archetypes or anything like that, of like the heroes who band together to save the day and thwart the enemy, and how there's going to be a lot of ethical gray areas along the way for our characters. But nonetheless, I am just really engrossed in this story. We get the short interaction between Blackthorn and Mariko. It's great to see the two of them interact with one another, given that we know both of their relationship with Toranaga. And again, the aforementioned parallel of both of them being devotedly adhered to their own religion. What is it? It's like they're adhered to their religion, but of course so much of the morality aspect comes through it as well. For whatever it is that Blackthorn may have done in the past, we do nonetheless get such a strong sense of morality from this man, and indeed from Mariko as well. So seeing the two of them interact with one another was very strong. There isn't a huge amount really I have to say in that regard. It is just working as an epilogue it's working as an epilogue for the previous scene we just seen, just for those two characters in particular, because we had so much exposition and characterization of Toranaga with his relationship with the regents already. I think it was still nice to get the insight for Blackthorn and Mariko at a moment like this, and a bit of the dry humor regarding his hygiene levels as well for Blackthorn kept it a little bit interesting as well. So we got a very quick scene in which Tsuji is talking to Toranaga, expecting the papers to go through for the Black Ship's departure, and I was surprised to see the plot point with Toranaga letting the Portuguese know that he knows exactly what it is that they're up to, that it has come this quickly. I'm kind of curious about that, because as we see in the succeeding scene of Kiyama getting that confirmation and telling the priest that he will sort this out, that this is his burden to bear and he will deal with it the best way we can, and then of course we see the assassin coming in the succeeding scene. I'm unsure as to whether or not that was done as a means to an end of just kind of simplifying the story. It does seem to be... I'm kind of curious about that, because surely Toranaga would know that making things this clear and not keeping it a secret that he knows that the Portuguese have a base, exactly what his motivation is behind that. If I were to take a guess just from having seen this episode, and I haven't seen the other 8 yet, I would hazard a guess to say it's because he is trying to bring about that reaction from the other regions very quickly, because of course we do know that he is trying to plant that division, don't we? So from my point of view, him allowing something like this to happen is for that very reason. I mean, we're going to see in the succeeding scene how when the assassin does come, he is very calm. He's very calm at all points anyways. He's an extremely stoic man. But he seems to be acting in a way like he's kind of just going through, just kind of like sleepwalking his way through an attempted assassination. And of course, then we learned that the assassination was against him. It was against Blackthorn. But be that as it may, having these two scenes nonetheless act basically as one scene. Everything that's happening here is just a setup for the immediately succeeding assassination attempt on Blackthorn. I think that, again, just getting stuff like that, it's very good pacing. And I think that this episode is far... I wouldn't say far better pace than episode 1, because episode 1 had a lot of ground to cover, so you cannot shame it whatsoever for being somewhat slower than this one. But nonetheless, I mean, I think had I watched these 2 episodes back to back, it would have been a total blast, thinking to myself, how so much has been delivered to us already. The momentum just keeps building and building, but still kind of trucking along at a very leisurely pace all the same. But I think also, had I not watched episode 1 without being able to rewatch it and just get used to the characters' names, it would have been a detriment to my understanding. But be that as it may, I just kind of wanted to talk about what I'm theorizing as to Toranaga's intentions there, but I'll probably talk about it a bit more in detail after I've rewatched the scene of the assassination attempt. And so for the final scene itself, we do get the confirmation that Toranaga had set this up so that he had swapped rooms with Blackthorn in order for him to confirm his own suspicions that were there to be an assassination attempt, that it would indeed be for Blackthorn and not be for himself. So we see that he is being incredibly strategic. He is truly thinking of everything 3 steps ahead. Of course, he can't stop everything. He wasn't able to stop his own people being murdered. This was essentially a direct attack on his life, even if they were coming to kill Blackthorn. It is a direct threat on him for all intents and purposes. And the entire sequence is great. Again, it really built on tension. I knew there was... I kind of suspected there might have been some degree of retaliation from Kiyama, given that we saw him in the previous scene. But during my first time watching this, I was not expecting it to come that quickly or that brutally, to be totally honest. It is a direct attack on his people. So as it stands, I think that on the Regent's end, there may be a bit of plausible deniability, given the fact that there was the ambush by the bandits, and then of course Blackthorn makes it back, and now there's an assassination attempt on Blackthorn itself. It's very difficult for any of these characters to not actively put 2 and 2 together as to who the other person is behind, as to who it is that's behind these actions, and to what their motivations would be. But of course, none of them can come right out and say it either. So it's very interesting to have such brutal conflict between these men that come up with words. A lot of it is a cold war, but it's a war that can instantly turn towards death, really at the drop of a hat. It's for that reason, for the short time frame in which all of this action seems to be occurring, I can almost imagine this working as a play in some regards. Regardless of its historical accuracy, I can understand why, for as strong as a book could be, seeing this in a visual medium and getting that passage of time, it's just working so well. There's a bit more that I can say with regards to how Toranaga is working around his interaction with these regions, and they with he as well. If I'm going to be totally honest, I think I'm going to wait until... Should I say it now? I think maybe it's better off waiting until I've seen episode 3 to talk about what's in my head. I will remember, and I think I have a theory as to what's going to happen, but in case the show ends up going a completely different direction with the 3rd episode, on that chance, I'll save my breath and I'll wait until I have the next episode to watch and probably talk about it in that review. But what I have in my head, I think it's going to come out naturally in the episode itself, so you'll hear me say it then. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I really enjoyed the first episode, and this has definitely proven that this is a show worthy of my time, for not only doing my reactions, but to do the heavy reviews where I'm systemically going scene by scene through everything. There's some shows where that wouldn't be necessary, not because the show is lacking quality necessarily, but it's just certain shows aren't the type of show to necessitate be doing such a thing. Shogun, on the other hand, definitely does. I want to thank you so much for watching this reaction and review, and if you've made it all the way to the end, I'd like to leave you with a poem. James Clarence Mangan, Rest Only in the Grave. I rode till I reached the house of wealth. 'Twas filled with riot and blighted health. I rode till I reached the house of love. 'Twas vocal with sighs beneath and above. I rode till I reached the house of sin. There were shrieks and curses without and within. I rode till I reached the house of toil. Its inmates had nothing to bake or boil. I rode in search of the house of content, but never could reach it, far as I went. The house of quiet, for strong and weak, and poor and rich, I have still to seek. That house is narrow, and dark, and small, but the only peaceful house of all. Thanks for watching.